I've lived it in the mud, the chaos, and the moments nobody writes about. This show is the truth, raw, unfiltered, and built for leaders who actually give a damn. If you're ready to grow, ready to own your own story, and ready to lead from the front, you're in the right place. Speak up, show up, lead. Let's get into it. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody. I'm JJ Hardy, and welcome to another episode of Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. I got another great guest here. This is not one of our regular routine conversations, and I brought Jake on to talk a little bit about communication today. But Jake, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to want to be on a podcast?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. First off, I'm excited to be here. I haven't done a live YouTube in a while, so this is going to be fun. Yes. So like you mentioned, my name's Jake McKee. You can find out more about me at jakemckee.com. I'm sure there'll be links you'll throw in the notes. But my work has always been focused in some form or fashion on community engagement, customer engagement. How do we really break the boundary between outside and inside, whether that's an engineering team and a creative team, whether that's a company and a fan community, whatever it might be. I got my start in the web, went into Lego and was there for a number of years and built the adult fan community, the relationship between the adult fans and the company. I've been all over all kinds of industries, working at Apple, running the global support community, and for tons of clients like Southwest Airlines, Canon Camera, H&R Block, just to name a few of the ones that I'm sure you've heard of before. But fundamentally, my work's always been about how do we bring customers or users or members closer to the organization that they're associated with, right? So breaking down that barrier between kind of outside and inside.
Well, that's excellent. Yeah, and I know that you and I, when we talked the last time, I learned that your brain works in a very operations focused way. And that's what intrigued me about having a conversation with you on here. So tell us a little bit about, how you do what you do and what makes you passionate about this whole idea of bringing people's ideas to the forefront and getting them started.
Yeah, so I was I was presenting to a market research team recently, and they were saying in the question and answer part of the session where I was talking, the session was about what I do for a living, right? How do we get these customer conversations to be more designed specifically for having better conversations? How do you take those conversations back into the company and actually do something with them, right? And not let them get lost in your notebook or forgotten about as soon as the offsite ends and you go back to work, right? How do you really start to change your culture and change your processes? And I was telling them kind of how I do it. And somebody from the crowd said, well, this sounds great, but how do you apply statistical validity to it, right? How do you put numbers behind all this work? And I said, there's ways we measure, but statistical validity is not one of them. That's your job. Mm-hmm. My job is the qualitative piece of this, right? What's the human side of this? There's a lot of work that gets done, and I think in our modern Western business culture that is so risk averse and quarterly focused that we start to lose track of the actual relationship between company and customer, especially as so many companies get bigger, they get more digital, they get more and more removed from direct customer engagement. And like any skill, that skill atrophies over time, right? When you stop talking to customers, when you stop really hearing what they have to say, what they're interested in, and you start protecting yourself first, creating products second, and hearing customer feedback third, you tend to have some problems, right? Uh-huh. And that goes for anything. I'm talking about products, but that really is a stand-in for a service, an activity, whatever it might be. I'm using products just because it's easier to think about. But the reality is when we stop really hearing what our customers are wanting, and when we stop hearing what they want and returning an answer back to them, we start to lose track of the relationship, right? And what happens when you lose track of a relationship? You lose track of connection and loyalty and enthusiasm, and just that general connectedness. And when you're connected to somebody or something, good things happen, right?
Yeah.
I'm much more willing to stand up for somebody that is in my close circle of friends, more so than just some random stranger on the street. Doesn't mean I wouldn't stand up for him, but I certainly might not go as far with them as I would with somebody else, right? And I know with your military background, you certainly are. I'm probably touching on something that you've probably long talked about, but
Sure.
how do we get past our own internal looking focus, right? Our team and how our team works for our own team's needs, and start to expand what team means, right? And our overall influence sphere, so to speak. Because I spend a lot of time working with product teams to help them bring customer voice into that product development process. So that could be anything that goes beyond the initial upfront market research or the at the end, testing process before you launch. But in between there's a lot of time that you've spent working and building and thinking and assessing. And some companies, some teams will go back out to customers, but they don't tend to do it in a relational way. They tend to do it in a research way, right? And which is great. There's fantastic. Doesn't take away anything from that. But I believe that when you get an engineer or product developer or designer really connected with the person that they're designing for, or a group of people that they're really designing for, you get a lot of really great benefits out of it, right? You get enthusiasm for the thing that they're doing, they're working on. You get surprised, which often in market research doesn't happen quite as much, or at least in not the same visceral way, right? If I read a report and get surprised, it's not quite the same thing as designing a product for golfers and being out on the golf course with them when something goes sideways and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm feeling the environment, I'm hearing the sounds, I'm seeing their body language, I'm reacting to it in real time. And so the question is, how do you do that in any sort of scalable way that isn't about statistical validity, but is about not relying on the voice of one person or the voice of two people, or having a group of people that you rely on, but when they've been there long enough, then they're almost like your team that gets so gone native, so to speak. How do you build those structures and those processes to be really tuned into this idea of relational engagement, relationship building, and doing it in a way that's effective for the outcome that you're seeking?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the idea of decentralized leadership, but also making sure when you're delegating, you're actually allowing people to do what they're supposed to do. It
Mhm.
it brings a different culture to the business that
Mhm.
allow people to be appreciated for what they do. And when you do the same thing with the customer relationships where you're following up because that's the culture of the business and everything else, and you're making that customer feel like that they're heard, just like you're allowing your employees to
Mhm.
feel like they're heard, then I think that gosh, what a great dynamic that you've built. But we
Right.
actually the comments are blowing up, man. You mind if I read a question? We have a couple questions that have popped up over here.
Please go ahead. I love
Um,
questions.
Good. So the first one is, what's the biggest leadership lesson you've learned from talking directly with customers?
What's the biggest leadership lesson? So, very good question, and I think that I've always been surprised at. I don't know if this is a lesson, but I'll give an insight, and then maybe there's a lesson that comes out of it. The insight is that as somebody, as a community guy, which has been my unofficial nickname for many years, the community guy,
The community guy.
I have always sought to get people out of the office and into the field,
Mm-hmm.
whatever field that looks like, and whatever office we're talking about. There's something really remarkable that happens. And again, it's sort of that same body language thing. I have seen executives who are incredibly resistant to the idea of putting any amount of money into this direct customer engagement, right? Why should we sponsor this event? Or why are we going to do user group meetups? What's the value of that, right? And then they get out there and they see it and they're like, oh my God, if we could get everybody in our customer base to be this excited about, talking to each other, talking to us, talking about the product, imagine what happens, right? And so part of my sort of holy quest that I've been on for 20 years is to systematize that, right? To operationalize that. You're right. I am sort of an operational creative, so to speak, right? I'm a creative brain. I'm a visual thinker, but also I like to do things that are repeatable. And my mantra has long been, everybody goes home happy. How do we make sure that the people that we're working with understand what makes the company happy, just as much as we need to make sure and acknowledge what's making them happy, right? So when I went out to a fan group event at Lego, for instance, when I was running community there, I very often would stand on stage talking to a group of fans at an event and say, we've heard you. Here's what we've heard. You want these things. Here's what we're delivering. If you want more of these things, here's what needs to happen. We need more of this, or we need your help and support in this way. And because it was this constant give and take and sort of equality of relationship, equity maybe is a better way. It wasn't equal, it was equitable, right? We weren't needing or wanting the same things, but both sides of that equation understood each other enough to talk to it effectively so that each side believed that the other person was listening. And when that's going on, man, those guys would bend over backwards and they would understand that we were also bending over backwards, right? And that formed an honest to God human relationship out of it that wasn't based on stock price or quarterly results or the legal team's risk abatement issues or whatever it might be. It was based on the reality that sometimes you get what you want, sometimes you don't, but here's why, right? Here's what we get instead, that sort of thing.
Interesting. I like that. This whole, I call that active responding, where you go up on, you did it on stage, I've done it on rooms like this. I've done it in person in boardrooms and stuff like that. But when people voice their concerns, but then you actually respond and repeat those concerns back to them to let them know that you heard them, people respond extremely well when they know that they're heard. Because honestly, I think that whether it's in business or if it's in personal life, it doesn't really matter. I think that's what most people want, is to be heard. What a powerful thing. And I'll even people actually do that.
I'll even say it slightly differently. I think it's not just heard. I think it's seen.
Yes.
Seen and known for who I am, right? As the psychiatrist would tell us, and the psychologist would tell us. Seen and known for who I am. And one of the things that the leadership lesson, perhaps in this direct, I told you there'd be a lesson that came out of this. The lesson for me, I would probably have to say, is that the curiosity always wins the day, right? And curiosity is a tool that is so powerful to make sure that somebody is being seen, that you're showing that you're seeing them. I've often said, I was just having this conversation with somebody a couple of days ago where I was saying that I don't know anything about a lot of things, but I'm really interested to learn things, right? And to be quiet about my own opinions or my own thoughts and just ask questions. As a history nerd, I just like all kinds of history. And there are periods that I like a lot, and there are periods I like a little, and some that I don't even know about. But there's something really fascinating about listening to somebody talk about their favorite period of history that reimagines it for me, right? The same way that when we go to the movie and, maybe I'm not a Revolutionary War buff, but I see some movie that's really interesting and I'm like, man, that's fascinating. I want to learn more about that. So if you know somebody's interest, and, we're talking about customers who have some connection to your company by default, right? Whether it's a product purchase, or they're a deep hardcore fan of this, or they're a loyal advocate, whatever it might be, there's some interests that they have in it, right? Even if it's just a tool they have to use at work and maybe they hate the tool, but they got to use it. I can still find ways to be curious and ask them questions that make them open up, become vulnerable, share with me insights that are really fascinating. And I have seen a lot of executives over the years, and I mean a lot of incredibly talented, high-level people who have maybe kind of lost some of that curiosity, right? And they can't sit still without telling somebody else about their ideas, right? Instead of sitting across the table and just being like, man, I'm leaving in. Tell me more. What's going on with that? How does that work for you? Oh man, that must be tough, right? And I've always said that the opposite way, that every executive has a shiny object, right? Whether it's the muscle car that they're restoring, or the nonprofit that they started, or the vacation they're about to take, whatever it is. And if you can tap into that, you can tap into the executive. Well, the same thing works the other way. If you can find the thing that really makes your customer, who they are as a person, man, they will open up to you and tell you all kinds of stuff. But you have to be interested in them first as a person and then as a customer.
Yeah.
And that's more than just the, sort of the glad handing or the handshaking or the, the golf. It's something deeper than that.
When I was a young soldier, I learned about the concept of active listening. And, you don't really think about it until somebody tells you what it is and why it's important. And, when you are sitting across the table, you can tell when you are saying something to somebody and they have something that they're just getting ready to shout. And it may not have anything to do with what you're saying, but the idea of active listening where you actually put your wants and needs to the side for just a second, just to have a genuine conversation with somebody and respond to what that person is actually saying. I think it's not rocket science that works extremely well.
Well, but what happens? What takes over? Our logical brain, our immediacy brain takes over. I've got to make this sale, so I'm going to focus hardcore on that sale.
Yeah.
That person has told me that they have limited time, so I want to make sure I get to that sales process as quick as possible. Right? How many sales calls have you been on before where you burn up the whole time talking about nothing, and then at the end of it, the guy's like, or the woman or whoever you're talking to says, well, we've run out of time, but man, I really wanted to hear about what you had to share with me, right?
Yeah, that's happened a lot.
And what a great way to end your initial sales call. Every single time I get on a call, and this is a skill that I have cultivated over the years. This isn't fake nonsense. This is me being genuinely interested in other people. When I get on a phone call, the first thing I usually ask is, where are you at in the world? Just because I want to know what's going on with them. Where are they physically located? It helps me to sort of center my conversation with them as a human, especially across video. And the second question is, tell me about something interesting in the background. So if I'm seeing a sign, I see this mindset sign, I'm like, oh, what is that? Tell me more. Or I see, the flag, or I see a painting, I say, oh, the painting, tell me about that. Who painted that? I am genuinely interested. This is not, sales nonsense. It's me being curious because I love hearing stories. I really enjoy that process of the story part. I didn't always, but the more I did it, the more I was interested, the more I was intrigued, the more I started to realize that that's kind of like history, and those same sort of stories. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, I want to hear more about that. And before you know it, again, I'm starting those conversations in a way that, to your point, you're not seeing my body language trying to get to the demo to show you the software, right? Or to get to the conversation about closing that contract or whatever. You're hearing and seeing me as a human. I'm seeing you the same way. And then, boy, you're bending over backwards to want to connect with me because, I've showed you who I was, and now you're willing to show me who you were.
Well, the wonderful thing about what you're saying is, for people who have, like the solopreneurs, especially of the world, who are struggling to try to figure out how to sell their products. Well, what you just described is building that relationship. If they ask you for that second meeting, or they ask you if you have a few more minutes to talk about your product, you just won. You just won. And,
that's right.
And it's because, they now they care about you. It's
right.
Before it was like, oh my gosh, this guy wants to talk to me about leadership. Oh, this guy wants to talk to me about sales communication. This guy wants to talk to me about this or that, or whatever the case may be. But when you can shift it to where they're asking you more about what you do and not just about who you are, you just did a great thing. So I agree with you. We have a couple other questions here. One person asked, how can busy managers make time for meaningful customer conversations?
So, first of all, I love this question. This is a very good question. I'm glad that we're talking about this. Yeah, this is fantastic. My first response is to scratch out that word busy, because the reality is every manager I've ever interacted with always is busy. The question is, or maybe the refinement of that question is, how does an effective manager make time for customer conversations? Because in my belief, and now I'm totally biased, right? I do conversation design for teams for a living, right? I help train and build and execute conversation design. So I'm definitely biased at this, but I do believe that fundamentally, a manager who's not having those customer conversations is not creating a culture where the team is empowered to have them as well, that you're not openly sharing amongst yourself when you have those conversations, sharing amongst the team. That's an ineffective manager, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the same way we get caught up in these kind of putting on our professor business hat. If you've seen the president business from the Lego movie, right, where we kind of shift gears into business mode, and then it's all about the numbers and the data and the outputs. But no, it's not really that way. And an effective manager, whether it's for your own team, for your customer base, for your colleagues around outside your team, the more humanistic and more relational you can become, the better that your outcomes are, because you understand things better. You get more insights and knowledge shared with you. A manager who doesn't ask his team what they think is a pretty bad manager who misses a lot of things, right?
Yes.
The ones that know how to engage with them, that build that process into their daily life, you have to do, even the most basic, simple performance review, right, that you have to do on a regular schedule. That's just an assumption. We don't debate whether we can debate how to do that, but the idea of giving somebody feedback on their work, how you go about that, whether it's a yearly performance review, which I hate, or whether it's the ongoing culture of open team sharing about what we as a team did or didn't do well, without it being this person really screwed up, unless they truly have made a massive oversight or something. Those choices of how you design your team include all those things with your teams or your colleagues. Why are you not including that with your customers as well? So I don't think it's really an issue of, we've got one more thing to add to the to-do list. I think it's in my quest to be an effective whatever I am, not just manager, right? That's more of a people mindset. In a somebody who's delivering something, right? A product developer, for instance. I'm the chief product officer, and the way that we develop great products is to thoroughly bake into our process of design time to go talk to customers, budget to go talk to customers, right? So I'm going to make a case to my board that I've got to have an extra, $10K a year so that my team can travel down the street to go see these guys. I'm going to allow them to take some time to get out and do stuff that will help them have those conversations. I'm going to encourage them through my own example to go to local events and see what's happening at the user groups, whatever it might be, right? But I don't think it's a yet another inbox to check issue. I think it's a how do I manage fundamentally as a overall management style conversation.
You're right. And just to I have 3 points based off of what you just got done saying that I'm going to try to remember. I might only get 1 or 2 because my brain will probably fry by the time I get done with the first and second one. But the first one was, my goodness, if people go around just blaming their employees for the problems that they have, that right there, you mentioned that, they need, the managers need to bake in time for this or bake in the budget for that. It's that we're talking about systems here. You need to make sure that instead of blaming somebody for making a mistake, you make sure that wasn't a systematic error that they were just involved with before you start throwing blame around people, because that happens way more often than people think. And then, that's just blaming. I'm big on ownership and accountability. So that one right there got me fired up. Another one, you do one thing like you do everything. So if you're saying you don't have time for this, well, what you're telling people is that you don't have time for them, or you don't have, and if it's a customer, you definitely don't want to do that. If it's your team, that's probably even more detrimental, especially if you're a sales manager. And I don't remember what the third one is anymore. And I told you it would happen, but those are things that I think they are really important to keep in mind, because if you don't have systems baked in to create more time for your team and your customers, you're losing. If you're blaming people on your team for not getting the job done, but you're not giving them time to do it, that's an issue. And in addition to that, just saying you're always too busy, the message is completely clear when you say that. You're saying you're too busy for that, or you're too busy for that person. That's always very, very clear, because I think that when people say that they're too busy.
100%.
Because that's what it is.
And the reality is we're never too busy for the things that matter to us either. I've long said, I've got small kids, two of the three have special needs, right? And I've got a busy career. I've got lots of hobbies that I want to spend time on. I've got all kinds of family obligations, etc. So if you ask me, I'd tell you I'm absolutely busy. But if you told me that I got free tickets when U2 played, my favorite band U2, when they played down the road at some tiny venue and they're doing an acoustic set, I don't care what happens. I'm going to make time because that's important to me. And my family knows that, if you two showed up to do that and I got tickets, I'm going and they'd help support me to do so, right?
Yes.
It's this fundamental process of what matters, how do we prioritize, what do we put value into? And so part of what I do is based around a framework that I built called the Conversation Compass, which is 5 core pillars of activity. One is conversation debt. So how do you assess where you're coming up short on this conversation design piece? Tuning. So, how do we have better conversations? How do we go out in front of a customer and not just ask our 5 questions that we've got written on our piece of paper, as an interview where we're interrogating them, right? But instead having a true back and forth. How can we improve that process? The third one is architecture. So how do we build an architecture so that it's built in, so that it's not an issue of I'm busy, how do I add it? It's a question of we have a fundamental debt in our team. How do we resolve this permanently, right? With better structure, with better operations, with better approaches. And then the last 2 are amplification. How do we get it out of our brains? What we hear, how do we get it out of our brains and out of our notebooks and out to the team, to the company as it needs to? And then traction. How do we do something differently because of what we heard? How many times have you gone to an offsite or a team meeting and everybody gets super wound up and they're super excited, and then 10 minutes after they get back to their computer, every single bit of that enthusiasm's gone, the tasks are forgotten, the momentum is lost, right? How do you actually make change happen? How do you make better products, services, outcomes? Because you've already got that structure in place, that architecture in place to ensure that just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. What a great way to think about that. Systems beat conversations every day of the week. Another question here. I don't know, Thrive Time. Not sure who that is. But do you think curiosity is a skill leaders can develop, or does it come naturally? I already know the answer to this one.
Well, I wouldn't have a job if I didn't think I could teach people how to do it. I think there's, like anything, I think there's a certain level of desire and mindset that has to be in before you can learn something. Trying to teach a kid math, if you've ever had a kid in school, 6th, 7th grade that's trying to learn some more complex math, where they've really moved from basic arithmetic into equations and whatnot, and you're trying to help them do it. If they convince themselves that they can't do it, there's not a chance in hell you're going to help them.
It's true.
You cannot help them at that point. If they find themselves in a place where, I think I can do this, I think I can pull this off, then it's possible. It'll take some work. It might, you might need to guide them. My philosophy is that there's plenty of ways to get people excited about the work that they're doing. And if you can't get them excited about the work that they're doing, they're probably doing the wrong work, right? They need to be somewhere else where they can get excited, because it shouldn't be that difficult to be interested. I think curiosity and conversation tend to be 2 different skills, right? One is a very functional. The conversation piece, we can talk about how you tune that conversation all day long, right? We can. I could sit down with you and we can break down. I do this with my clients where we'll break down a customer conversation and do a field debrief, right? Where we look at it and go, you went in with with a list of 5 questions. You went through all 5 of them in a row. You didn't follow up with anything. You missed this cue when they really wanted to talk about something else that would have been fascinating to know more about, because you were so heads down into that. That's a conversation design, conversation training piece. That's a little bit different than the curiosity piece, which is the joy. To me, curiosity is a joy, right? It's the same reason why humans go to museums, is because, there's nothing truly valuable to our day to day about seeing a stuffed caveman or a stuffed brontosaurus or something, right? But why do we go? Because we want to challenge our brains. We want to sort of experience something that makes us think about other things, that in our human pattern recognition brain, that maybe it adds to that pattern or throws off that pattern about how the world around us works, right? And so I think, yes, we can train it, I suppose, but with curiosity, I think that's really more of an issue of understanding what's happening for the person, that they've either lost the joy or they didn't have the joy for the job in the first place, and addressing that. And also if they've got that sort of desire, that innate desire, then how do we make sure that we walk them through the path? And I do this a lot, where again, it's getting the executives to go see the event in person, right? The first time that I had the lawyer that I worked with at Lego, who was very great. I loved her. She was a wonderful person, still is a wonderful person. But at the beginning, when we were doing this fan outreach, at that time, everybody thought of Lego as a boys toy company for boys 7 to 12, not for these adults building, 6-foot tall statues of liberty in their living room, right?
Oh, cool.
And it was kind of odd. It didn't seem right. And today it's like, well, of course that's what we do. But back then, that was not a normal thing. It wasn't a standard that everybody understood or wanted to do more of, right? I was arguing for 1% of the business being these adults. Today it's 45% plus, right? So it's a whole different world today. But back then, it was really hard to get people to understand why we were even bothering, that this wasn't just weird, or this wasn't a risk vector, right? That this was an opportunity. And it was hard to see that from the office. It was hard to be curious about it in the office. So the way I overcame that, and it was less about training them to be curious as it was to excite them with some joy, right? That made the natural curiosity come out. So when I got them to walk into a place, and when she and several of our other executives walked into the event, just as two grown men who hadn't met each other in person before, but had known each other for years online, met each other, gave each other these huge bear hugs, and one of them started tearing up because it was so emotional. They immediately clicked and went, oh, yeah, this is fascinating. This is exciting. This is joyful. How do I do more of that? And that's where the curiosity stemmed from, right? So this is part of a design challenge. Part of it's an open-mindedness, and some of it's technique. But the technique really kind of comes after you've found that way to get that excitement, that enthusiasm.
Yeah, I agree. Well, there was one question. I don't remember who it was, and I can't find it anymore. But it's on here. Somebody asked what your favorite leadership book is. Probably for both of us.
Favorite leadership book. I'm trying to think. So I will say, as a community nerd, one of my favorites was, so I think leadership maybe a little bit differently, because I don't often read traditional leadership books. I read stories, right? I hear interesting stories. And, there's a number of books around things like, the one I'm reading right now is around traffic patterns and understanding why people respond to certain things in certain ways. And that's my own natural curiosity. I find more leadership learning, so to speak, through human social connection and sort of relationship building, community building, that sort of thing. Because I think fundamentally, I can teach you how to be a leader all day long and tell you about performance reviews and tell you about all that sort of thing. But really what gets me going is to understand the social dynamics behind that. Because my belief is that if you're really good with people, you tend to be really good at leadership in at least some huge percentage of it, right? Which is why, behind me, I've got a lot of books around psychology and cocktail parties and storytelling with data and that sort of thing. So I don't know if it's traditional leadership books, but that's what I tend to consume, and I think it helps me to learn my craft better. But also, the better I am at my craft, and the more joyful I am about it, the more I tend to attract people that, if I misstep, that they give me forgiveness, that I learn this social connection of, tell me what's going on with you so that I can help you get through it, right? And break down problems. And my superhero skill is helping disparate groups talk to each other. And that comes not from a leadership book, it comes from connection books, right? From understanding human relationships and historical relationships and that sort of thing.
I tend to agree. I most of the stuff that I read on a personal level, for whether it's for my self study or just because I'm interested in it, is stuff from like John Maxwell or Simon Sinek or Robert Greene or whatever the case may be. And it's all about how you can become more connected with people, different personalities and stuff like that to help kind of understand the human condition. Also, I'd like to balance that with everything I already know about military leadership, and I'll read things from like Jocko and some other people who have served, who write and study and continue to publish books about leadership, Also, you know, if my favorite leadership book, I guess I can honestly say, is the one that I wrote. So please get that one. But
That's my favorite too. Yeah, that's fine.
There you go. Not that I'm partial or anything like that, but yeah, no. But seriously, I like to kind of. I learned. I went through multiple levels of leadership study and training when I was in the military, and I'm just fascinated how servant leadership and getting to know people and understanding who they are is really the intersection of both military leadership and civilian leadership, and how you become successful, whether it's as a business owner or a manager in a company or whatever the case may be. So that's kind of what interests me. And we are getting, thank you everybody for continuing to comment and ask questions, but we're going to have to start closing this out. So I appreciate you putting the stuff in there, but we could talk for hours, but we're going to have to button this up. So I'm going to give you the opportunity. Go ahead, Jake. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to ask if we can do a lightning round, maybe of a couple of them before we wrap up, and if we've got time. If not, then whatever we don't get to, I'm also happy to answer on LinkedIn.
Yes. So how do you help leaders become more self-aware without making them defensive?
Figure out what they're interested in, relate it somehow. If they're interested in cars, take them to a car community if you're trying to teach them about community.
And I will say yes, and say meet them where they are. Get to know them, get to know what they're interested in. But also, if you know that person and you know what makes them tick, don't meet them where you think they should be. Meet them where they are. That's what I would say.
Understand them as a person and then as an employee.
Correct. Let me see. What's the most surprising lesson customers have ever taught you?
I think the easiest answer for that in their lightning round is that everybody has a passion. And if you can somehow connect to their passion, you're connecting to them. And if you're connecting to them, they'll do just about anything to help you that is within their power.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And I think that for me, because I also have a private business teaching leadership, I think that I learn, and I knew this would happen once I became a business owner, because I served in the military at multiple levels and I had people working for me, and the same thing applied there. But I learn more than I teach. And it helps me grow as a person. So whenever I get a new customer, I'm excited to know what I'm going to learn from that person, because it always happens. I think that's that. I think that's my favorite and most surprising lesson.
Well, and to that, I'll put a word on it that psychologists use called contagion. It's usually meant for, if you show up in a place and somebody's doing something problematic, that you tend to do something problematic too. But I think the exact same thing works in opposite, right? When you're enthusiastic, somebody else is too. When you're polite, somebody else tends to stay in that realm. When you are really grinding and working hard and excited about it, or showing positivity about it, and then maybe not excited about staying up until midnight to get the job done that night. But when you're not grumpy and short-tempered, they're probably not going to be grumpy and short-tempered either, right? Contagion is a reality that we can take advantage of, not just try and avoid.
Yeah, contagion. I'm gonna I like that. And actually, I can't find any more questions. Just a whole crap load of comments. By the way, because of that, I'm going to go ahead and say we've gone up to 300, and now we're still at 270 people watch. Thank you so much for participating today, and everybody showing support in the comments here, and make sure that if you like this stuff, first of all, look in the description wherever you're watching this. Jake's email address or his website is on there. Make sure you read about him, contact him, all the above. His stuff is there. But if you want to see more conversations like this, it's extremely important that you click that subscribe button. You don't get notified unless you do. Just saying. If you liked it and you forgot to click it and then you can't find it again, I mean, that's on you. Just click that subscribe button and it'll come back again. For closing comments here, Jake, what would you like to say as a message to the world, or everybody listening right now and later on, that you would like to pass on about what you do and what you're passionate about, just to give kind of a closing comment?
Yeah. Well, like you said, you can find me at jakemckee.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Would love to follow folks. I do a lot of things. I've got my own podcast talking about conversation design with some really, really fascinating people that are from everybody from a flavor designer to a political candidate to a flight attendant, people who rely on conversation for a living. So you definitely check that out. And on my website, there's a bunch of tools and resources and even some conversation practice tools and whatnot that can really help you out with that. I will say that we often try to separate our business selves from our personal selves. Don't do it. Yeah, don't put your business hat on. The more that you can bring yourself and your personality and your vulnerability to your work, to your conversations with your customers, the more great things happen. So, there's always a balance. There's certainly privacy concerns that you might have about how much you share and where you share and what you share, but that's different than your vulnerability, your joy, your excitement, enthusiasm. And there should be work and enthusiasm in what you're doing, joy in what you're doing, what your team's doing, and don't forget that contagion. How do you figure out how to be contagious in that? When you sit down with a customer, they'll feel it, they'll love it, and they'll want to hang out more with it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's important to always be yourself. The quickest way to make yourself insecure is to put on a mask just for the sake of others. Don't do that. Who you are is extremely, it's fine. It's good. There's nothing wrong with it. And, people will want to talk to you more when they get along with who you are than if they find out later on that you were putting on a mask and you're actually this, whether it's still a good person, it's just different than what they're used to. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I have nothing more to say, but by the way, I did subscribe to Jake's podcast. I highly recommend you check that out. You can see that on his website. It's actually really intriguing, and he's right. He has some very interesting guests on there. So
yeah, for sure.
It's worth checking out. Make sure you subscribe to that. Don't forget to subscribe here. Don't forget to like. If you feel like other people absolutely need to see this, then make sure you share it as well. But otherwise, thank you all for following us on this journey. I have nothing else to say. And thank you, Jake, for being a wonderful guest today. And everybody,
thanks for having me.
Yeah. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you.